Well, hello, everybody. It's Heather, and I'm super excited. We'll be going live here shortly with a couple guests that I really do adore. They're men after my heart. I'm in Colorado right now, and we are set to get about 7 or 8 inches of snow. And so this is going to be, an interesting time. I have 4 children home with me right now, and it's going to be fun. So today we're going to be talking about emotional health and the role that connection plays, particularly during this time. And so I want to introduce now both. I'm going to introduce both Kevin Strauss and Joe Kwon. They are my guests today. Hello there, guys.
Hey there.
Super excited to have you on here. I mean, all the three of us were actually in Chicago just about a week ago for No Longer Virtual, which is Sarah Elkin's baby. And it was my 4th year in a row going, and I had a lot of pressure not to go. And, some people may think it was irresponsible, but in the end we went, and we found deep connection there. Not, live, I guess, dictionary connection. I'm talking about real connection where we can just be ourselves with each other. And I think that's, super critical. But during that time, Kevin was able to, he spoke for the first time, and he enlightened, I think, all of us. We did a lot of really good exercises. And Kevin, you talked a lot about this idea of the kind of different levels or different quadrants of health that we need to be considering. And so I wanted to bring you into this conversation, and then bring Joe into it as well on the connection side, because connection is what's feeding all this emotional health too. And so I want to, and that, and you'll talk a little bit about Uchi, I know, as well in that regard. But I wanted to talk about that. So welcome both of you. And whoever's there in the world, because I'm going to be looking, as they're talking, I'm going to be looking here on LinkedIn too. Please do tell us in the comments, if you're here, who are you there? Where you're from. If you're not from the US, it doesn't matter. Just tell us where you're at. And then also join in the conversation. So when we're talking, chime in with the yays, the nays, any additional information, any questions you might have. You might as well. We're all here together, and most of us are working remotely and at home now because of this crazy virus going on. So just join in. It's not just the three of us talking, but it's you hopefully having a conversation with us. So, okay, so Kevin, tell us, if you could go over for, kind of doing an overarching thing of what you did for us at No Longer Virtual about those quadrants of health, that's what I'm calling it right now. And then even talking about some of the exercises we did, and maybe how some other people can I guess, be drawn into this idea of these different quadrants, and then focusing more on emotional well-being as well.
Yeah, definitely. So at No Longer Virtual, we were really trying to focus on overall well-being and what we can do for ourselves, especially a lot of us at NLV are solopreneurs. And I've been working in this area of emotional health for almost 20 years now. And I think of it also in terms of overall well-being. And the definitions that I have really come to form based on all this work and research I've done over the years are kind of different than what we're used to. And that's what I was sharing. So in terms of wellness or well-being, there are a lot of different models. There's the three-legged stool model. There's the 7 dimensions of well-being that University California, Riverside, something like that. They have a great model. But I try to keep things really basic. So I've landed on 4, which are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And I think it's really important to differentiate between mental health and emotional health. A lot of times people think social health and financial health and things like that, and that's fine, but I can make a very easy argument for why financial is actually a subcomponent of emotional health, or social, another subcomponent of emotional health, and so on. And I differentiated during the talk about emotional health versus emotional intelligence. Both are very important, but they're also very different. Joe and I talked a bit about mental health and mindfulness, which I still need to get back to you on that, Joe. And again, mindfulness, meditation, those things are very important, and they do support mental health, but they're different than emotional health. So if you like, I can give the definitions that I shared. So just ask that our audience keeps an open mind, because this is very different than what they've probably heard before. So especially with how in the world we talk about mental illnesses and mental health problems, the way we end up talking about it, I often find that it comes down to this. Mental health, the definition that I choose, is a person's ability to focus, to concentrate, to think clearly, to perform cognitive tasks. And we have all these behaviors that we work on, depression, addiction, things like that, that fall into a mental health disorder or a mental illness. But then when we talk about things like mental fitness, it all ends up going back to your cognitive abilities. And it seems like this is some of my rationale behind my definition. It seems like when we talk about mental health, it's like a person chose like, oh, I'm going to be a drug addict right now. No, it's not this choice. No one, as a 7-year-old kid, no one ever grows up and says, oh, I want to be a drug addict when I grow up. That doesn't happen. So yes, it's a choice to take the drug, of course, but these behaviors that we are choosing are typically subconscious choices in order to try and compensate for an unmet need or a pain. And that pain is usually emotional. And again, that's what I've learned over 20 years, reading all kinds of research, even publishing some of my own research. So it's an emotional pain, or it's an emotional unmet need. And the definition that I choose to subscribe to for emotional health is a person's ability to give and receive love. And by love, I mean love, connection, and belonging. I know we have a lot of emotions, of course, but our ability to give and receive love is very basic, and it's built into our biology. When we receive love and we're connecting with somebody, we get an oxytocin release. That's a powerful hormone known as the love hormone. That's the bonding hormone. And like Joe will talk about, in a bit, what nurtures emotional health more than anything else is our ability to connect. So that's kind of the basics. And then what happens is when that need for love is not satisfied or nurtured the way it needs to be, it causes pain. And the human brain cannot distinguish between physical pain and emotional pain. It just knows I'm hurting. And a human will do anything to avoid pain. And in the absence of the ability to connect authentically, like we did at NLV, we turn to our behaviors to try and manage our pain. So things like, how many people eat their feelings? Having a bad day, or I get dumped by a, girlfriend, I might eat some ice cream or drink some alcohol. That's how we try to manage our pain. So that's a kind of a big, broad, sweeping overview. But the last thing I'll just say about the emotional health and connection is that when you look through the research, which I've done a lot, you can find these studies that show a person who's struggling with drug addiction, when they feel more connected, their addiction improves. Someone who's struggling with alcohol abuse, when they feel more connected, their alcohol abuse improves. Someone who's struggling with an eating disorder or depression, when they feel more connected, both of those behaviors that we call illnesses improve. So it just shows you how powerful the emotional connection and the bond that we humans, not even humans, primates, not even primates, mammals need to connect, and we're just mammals. So there you go.
And I have to say that for those who weren't there, I don't know, in virtual, what was so powerful about it is we had to, we had exercises where we had to kind of jot down some things that he wanted us to jot down inside of each of those quadrants, and where we, and measure ourselves on how well we thought we fared, and we were able to talk. And one of the exercises that he did, it was just like so super powerful. In fact, since I have all of my family here for the next, I don't know how many weeks, I'm probably going to do it, which is staring at a person. And these are just these are friends, but staring at a person for 2 minutes straight without, taking your eyes off, without talking, just completely silent. And I remember all of us kind of saying, like, the first minute was just like, oh gosh, the person can see through me, the person can see through me, the person can see through me. And then it was like, oh my gosh, the person can see me. Like, they can see me, really, that connection. And for most of us, it was powerful. It had a lot of different responses in the room. And I think that's a good segue into talking a little bit to you, Joe, about this idea of connection, and then I'll also talk some more about that too. But I want to hear your perspective as the connection counselor. I just love that. It'll one of those things I'll never forget. And I do agree that you are that. So I'd like to hear more about what you think about this idea of connection and how it drives this our feeling of emotional well-being.
Sure, absolutely. And by the way, Kevin, your talk even better the second time around. So I really drives home the point. And I also had a very good experience in the exercise that Heather was talking about. So the way I think about it, and for folks maybe who are out there who are listening now or later, if you think about people that you connect easily with, right? You're probably reaching out to those people now. You're texting them, you're calling them, you're video chatting with them. That's easy. Right? You've got that, right? But if you think about it, your ability to connect and to connect with people that maybe initially it's not that easy to connect with limits your ability to thrive, right? So if you take the world of people that you can easily connect with, it's a circle that's this big. But if you think about other people who are maybe more difficult to connect with, it could be a parent that you're not having a great relationship with, a sibling that you've had a falling out or a disagreement over money or something. It really starts to limit you, that inability to connect. And if you think about what we're going through now, it's a perfect opportunity to reconnect with people, but it's not easy. So I just wanted to share a couple things that hopefully will help people when they're trying to connect. The first thing is, when you're trying to connect with someone, especially if it's not someone you normally connect with, you're gonna get sort of the Heisman or the stiff arm at first, and you have to kind of expect that. Be able, if it's important to you to connect with them, to be able to sort of put your ego away just for a little while and say, you know what, maybe it's not a good time. Try again, and try again, and keep trying, because this person, for whatever reason, you're not normally connecting. So it's going to take a while for them to trust that you're genuine and it's not you're just calling because you want something or you're in trouble. If you think about Game of Thrones, I think it's like Arya Stark, and she's like sitting outside waiting for the door to open. They did that in all the old kung fu movies, right? Where they would sit in front of like the master's temple and just wait for like a week, just starving in the rain and the snow, just to see if this person seriously wanted to be a student. Sometimes that's what it really takes to break through the ice and connect with people. So let's say you're in now, okay? You're starting to have a conversation, but it's still difficult because it's not natural. You haven't been connecting with this person all the time. And sometimes you finally do connect, you get on the phone with them or on a chat, and it's kind of dead. It's not really happening. So you get frustrated for that. So what I like to tell people with that, and I did an article with Aaron Scogan, I think Heather and Kevin, you may know him from LinkedIn. He's a very enthusiastic cyclist. You know, he likes to cycle. And it was this idea of getting into the right gear. So especially when you're dealing with someone that you don't talk to that often, they might be in a different place than you are. So you may be really excited to tell them something, and they're kind of down. Well, what works better is not to try to yank them up to your excitement level, but to actually move closer to where they are being down and be a little bit more calm and reserved, and then make that connection, right? So now you're shifting gears and you've made that attachment, and then you incrementally shift up. And it works the opposite way too. Maybe you're down and they're really up, you know, and maybe you have to raise your energy a little bit and don't rain on their parade, and connect the gears, and then gradually they can come down to where you are, because it's too much. If any of you who've ever ridden a bike with gears, if you try to switch like between 4 or 5 gears, what happens to the bike? It goes, oh, it's not
Gets
good.
angry.
Yeah,
So,
you might drop your chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So emotional connection works that way too. I mean, how many of us have come home from work or a trip, and we're really excited and we want to tell our family or whoever's in our household about it, and they're just in a totally different place. And our excitement is not well received because we fail to read the room and see, like, wait a second, they're not ready to receive this where they are. They need to get to be moved a little bit. I need to attach with them before. You can't really expect people to kind of jump exactly to where you are just because you want to be there. So just a few tips that hopefully can help people who are and encourage people to reach out to people they may not have in a while. Kevin, you wanted to say something.
Well, I love what you're saying about the gear shifting and matching the other person's where they're at. And it doesn't have to be just about their energy level. Like if they come home from work, like, oh my God, I had such a great day. It doesn't just have to be about that. One thing I think about a lot, and this happens so much, I think, with parents and kids, is how can we expect to have the really heavy, deep, serious conversations with our kids when we're struggling to even have the simple, easy conversations? So starting small. So this is sort of the matching the level. Maybe start with something really small and easy, like, what was your favorite subject in school? Or, what's the best thing that happened? What's your favorite activity during recess? Asking favorites is always a really easy one. But having both parties answer that kind of a question so that you start to level the playing field where the parents are answering the same question. Maybe the kid never knew what the parent's favorite subject in school was, or describing something memorable from childhood. I mean, I do this with my parents, and they're 80, and I'm learning things about them that I've never heard before. I'm like, how do I not know this already? And so, but once you start with a little bit of a foundation, then, like you're saying, Joe, you can start to gear up and get into those deeper, bigger, heavier conversations. It might be about drugs, it might be about sex, or whatever it is, with the parent-child relationship. So I love that whole analogy, Joe. That was awesome. And if I can just give a quick shout out to Renee Smith, because she was going to be my co-presenter at NLV, and it was her eye gazing activity that was coming from Renee. So I just want to give that a shout.
Nice. Well, I love that. It was super powerful. I loved everything about the whole thing. I mean, Shelley Brown, really the entire event was amazing, and the level of depth in our conversations. And by the way, Joe, yes, I know Aaron Scogan. He is also a Leader with Heart, part of the Leadership with Heart community.
Oh,
yes,
yeah, great,
yes.
Great,
great.
I
love him. I mean, he's a natural connector. So I can see you writing some kind of joint article with him, because he does have the ability to just, and he's so warm. And so it's interesting when I think about this time. I mean, like I said, I'm home right now with 4 kiddos. We're all experiencing our own emotional up and downs with, oh my gosh, I can't see friends. Oh my gosh, I want to be at school. I mean, you would not believe the level of tears and frustration and nuttiness that's taking place. And then I think we'll get, by the time next week comes, we'll get into a groove. We just found that we may not be getting back to school now till maybe mid-April sometime. And so this is a whole other interesting place to be. But with everything, it's looking at it with kind of more rose-colored eyes. And so I want to figure out how I can take these times. Yes, I'm not having the time to write the book, but I'm also having more time to have the oxytocin, as Melissa would continue to remind us, right? That because I can cuddle with them. Maybe I can cuddle with them on the couch and watch something after they're done with their schoolwork, or I can play a board game with them. I can do more things where we are truly connecting. And it's critical because I'm a leader inside of my own home. And as you all know, I talk a lot about the connection between basically it's leadership and loyalty. And I do believe, kind of as Kevin does really, that from a leadership perspective and an employee loyalty perspective, emotions are what drive loyalty. And it's those leaders inside of the work environments that create the experience along the journey for the employee that produces more positive emotions like recognition, pats on the back, whatever those things might be, feeling valued, or negative emotions, making those employees think a second time about staying there and wanting to leave. And either they leave physically or they leave, or they leave mentally and emotionally. They check out themselves and they don't feel like there isn't much that they can do in the world. Like why am I here? There's no value in what I'm doing. They lose that connection. I'm curious to know both of your perspective on that.
I totally agree. Everything that you're saying, I could go on and on about that one too. It's great. I completely agree. When it comes to the loyalty factor, we tend to have more loyalty when we trust someone, and we don't tend to trust people unless we know people. So how do we get to know people, to understand each other, to feel understood? That's all about the emotional connection that Joe and I are always talking about. If you don't know someone, you're not going to tend to care about them. And care in the workplace is a huge thing. So, yeah, loyalty and caring and retention, it all comes down to connection. We're already hiring people in the workplace who can do the job. Mentally, they're sound, they're adequate. That's why we hired them. We also probably hired them because we felt a little bit of a personal connection with that person. That tends to happen a lot in the during the interview process. Do I feel comfortable with that person? Is this the kind of person I want to spend day in and day out with? So I think it really comes down to how well we know and understand each other, how well we connect with one another. And if you don't feel heard, if you don't feel valued in the workplace, just like you said, Heather, first you're going to get a little toxic and you're going to get negative and you're going to start complaining to your coworkers, right? That's like the first thing that happens. If it goes on, what probably happens next? Well, you probably disengage. You do the bare minimum to get the job done, but your engagement, going the extra mile really drops off. And we know from the data that the global workforce engagement numbers, it's like 15%.
It's really bad.
Yeah,
So
crazy.
right, Jeff? So most people are disengaged already. And when you can't take it any longer and your boss just isn't hearing and valuing you, what do? You quit.
You're right. Hit the road, Jack. That's exactly right. You just leave.
Exactly. Yeah,
So,
it's not like having kale or a stand-up desk or a ping pong table is going to keep you at the workplace.
No.
And we know from the right, and we know from the data that oh man, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Joe can take over, and you'll
yeah,
pop
so
right back
Kevin,
in.
let me add on,
Do
to what you were saying, and
Thank you.
on many things, you and I are simpatico. So
Totally.
definitely agree with everything you've been saying. So I've been lucky throughout my career. My wife often laughs at how sort of things have just always fallen into place, for me. But to have really kind of emotionally intelligent, managers along the way, and even now, so I'm very thankful for that. And one thing I would say that you would notice when you don't have an emotionally intelligent manager, and that has happened to me like earlier in my career, luckily not for too long, is that you can't talk your way out of, I think someone said this, you can't talk your way out of a problem you've behaved your way into. Right? So we have this problem going on right now. I'm sure HR is talking to all the managers and saying, have a meeting with your people, let them know you care about them. Well, you know what? Those words and those actions are good and important. And I'm saying you should definitely do that. But your team already knows if you care about them. They've known a year ago from all those little actions that you took on all those tinier emergencies that happened. So no amount of, and I'm not saying people shouldn't get, EQ training. I think it's great to definitely do that. But don't think that like a word or a catchphrase or a technique is going to replace your humanity and your ability to really connect with people, to begin with. And something like this is a good opportunity to kind of explore that and see, like, am I really connecting to my coworkers? Would people really rally to me if I was down? Do they care about me? Are they going to go the extra mile? You find out pretty quickly if the answer is yes or no in an emergency situation.
That was beautiful, Joe. That was awesome.
It is, and it's interesting because I think both of you know, because you participated in the survey, that my next book is on the art of caring leadership, and it is, and you are in it, Joe, of course. But it's just so funny how we, in a lot of ways, we do overcomplicate it. I mean, my goal is always to try to simplify it down to its smallest scintilla, I guess, so that we can see these are the actions that we need to take. But there is this level of authenticity. This is not a fake the funk and team. This is not that. It's not that. Now, I train on emotional intelligence. I train on more, emotionally intelligent communication and behaviors. But in the end, if you don't care just about a person, about people that are standing in front of you, all these other things don't matter. They just don't matter.
They don't. You're right. You're so right. Yeah.
So I love this, your idea when you talk about emotional well-being, and I know we've been talking about this for a while. I think about so much now in the workplace and all the people, the managers, the employees, everybody who's really struggling. They're used to their coworkers being around. The leaders are used to being able to go into an office, knock on the door, and ask what's going on. Now, everybody's working remotely, or they're trying to get people to work remotely. They're trying to, and that's also not possible. Then there's questions of, well, how do you treat the people who can't work remotely? What do we do? I mean, there's so many questions right now that are going on in the HR community about how do we do this and do it in a way that's compassionate, do it in a way that's also safe and secure for our people. It's critical to be thinking about all these different mixes, but in the end, we have to show true care. We have to make sure that there is dignity in the process of whatever we're doing right now. Whatever decisions we make, the dignity has to remain. And I think that's the key thing to remember. It's like everything I do, like if I'm an HR professional, I'm a leader, is this going to leave the person feeling like they have their dignity? And if the answer is no, we might want to rethink what that looks like for those employees that are there. And then for the leaders, again, if you're struggling and saying, I don't have control now. I mean, there's like we're talking about emotional well-being, like there's a whole psychosocial thing happening right now, man. And it's crazy, the levels of complexity that are going on around this topic. I want to really quickly, before we keep yapping, because the three of us can keep talking, I want to just say hi to some of the people that I see who said they're on here. That would be Shelley Brown. Hello there.
Yay.
Yay. Janice Massey Riley. Thank you so much. Yeah. Calling in from snowy Colorado. Sam failed to read the room. I got to figure out what that is. You'll have to comment again and tell me what that means. It's totally over my head. So that's what he says. Sam Kalasin. I'm probably not saying his name right, but love you anyway. David Beaumont. Hello there. He says you have to work to bridge the gap, and I think he's talking about just the connection in that relationship. You have to, and it is a job. This is work. This is not. Sometimes it comes easier for some of us than others, but mostly all of us have to work at that bridging that gap.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, that's the thing about health and well-being is that it's not just a one-time thing. It's something that we do throughout our entire life. You can't just do one training run and think, oh, I'm going to go run a marathon, right? You need to train, you need to work out, fitness regularly. You need to eat well regularly. You need to nurture your relationships regularly. You need to work your brain or take a brain break regularly for your mental health. And everything does, interrelate, right? Your physical can impact your emotional, your mental impacts your spiritual. It all interrelates. But, if you're going for a run, you're probably primarily nurturing your physical health, and then maybe you're able to clear your mind. So it's get some mental health secondary benefits. But you have to do it on a regular basis. And just one other thing, if I can, since we're talking about emotional intelligence as well, which is super important, just to distinguish between emotional health and emotional intelligence, where emotional health, your ability to give and receive love, connection, belonging. Emotional intelligence is your ability to understand and manage your emotions. So those are two very different things. I had a boss who was extremely emotionally intelligent. He could tell you exactly how he was going to, feel, how he was going to react. If you did this, this is what he's going to do. And he would blow up and verbally berate people, publicly, regularly, daily. In fact, there was a new employee, and twice in the first 8 working days, the guy got completely reamed out verbally in his first 8 working days at this company.
Wow.
Right. So, but I understood that this CEO was so emotionally unhealthy, and which turned him into a complete narcissist. And how many of us have had, the narcissistic bosses and that kind of thing. Right. So that's how the poor emotional health can present. But having the emotional intelligence, which is good and helpful to know how you might react and to manage that reaction, that's fine. But if you're dealing with an underlying pain that's not been addressed and you don't even understand it or recognize it, it's going to be really tough to try to manage it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So,
Heather, I wanted to ask you something. You mentioned dignity before and a lot of the sort of consulting and help that you give to companies. I mean, I think I know how you would answer, but is it possible to do sort of difficult things and make difficult decisions towards your employees, right? Because they've done something wrong or financially, there's a problem, but still allow them to keep dignity and maintain their dignity, and what's the importance of that?
It's interesting. Some years ago, I was laid off from a job, and the layoffs are just hard, right?
Yeah.
When you're fired or laid off, it's emotionally draining for anybody. And so I'm not going to try to ignore and say that it didn't hurt when it happened. But the way that my manager at the time and the head of HR responded to that event made all the difference for me. I mean, my manager on the phone, you could see he was hurting by having to make the phone call. He was just hurting, and he was sorrowful for having to do it. And it made me realize even more in that moment how much he valued me. And he appreciated me as a person for what I brought to the table. That was a big one. Secondarily, that HR person. So at the time, my husband, she didn't know that 2 weeks before this whole layoff, my husband had quit his job. And
oh, wow.
And he insured our entire family. So there's 6 of us, and we have no insurance. She doesn't know this, obviously. So I let her know this, and she decided. She looked. She goes, Heather. I looked, and they covered all of us on the COBRA for the next 3 months anyway. And it's those kind of things that, yes, I was laid off, so I didn't have a job. So most of the time we lose our dignity when we lose that job, because a lot of us associate who we are with that.
Right.
But when that manager and that head of HR showed that level of caring that I'm talking about, it let me leave with like feeling like, okay, I could breathe. There was I had insurance. Yes, I didn't have the job yet, but I had people who cared for me. And while I was there, I was a valued person in that workforce. It made all the difference. So
that's huge.
I think that's what I think. Those are the kind of actions, Joe, that I think leaders can do right now, even in this furlough situation. I have a couple people who have reached out to me on that. And what can they do, and it's like how the things you say to those people when you have to furlough, and then the type of support that you have in line that you provide them as that furloughing is happening. It's still painful, but it's less debilitating. And I think from an emotional well-being standpoint, maybe you can wrap your head around it a little bit more when you feel cared for in that process, because it's not over. It's just temporarily paused. It's a very confusing time. And I think the more we can use the right words and treat people with dignity, the better off just the entire workforce is. Because one thing I noticed people don't think about is this idea of when we leave that workplace, whether it's furlough or not, there is this feeling of loss from the people who are left behind, because now their team member is either gone permanently or temporarily. And there's a level of guilt that's associated with staying behind and still having your job. There's a level of loss that's there because now somebody who is really critical to your team is gone. Not just from, it could be from I have so much more work now to do because I'm making it for the person. But no, if I've been working for that person for a long time, I deeply cared for that person, and now they're hurting, and I feel helpless in that. So see how all of this kind of goes back, and I'm glad you asked that, Joe, because it really all does feed back into, in my mind, the emotional well-being part, because it is hard to receive that when you're in that place mentally. It's hard to receive that caring and that love and all that sometimes when you're in that place. But I think it's easier to do when you have leaders who care for you, and they show it. They show it as well. There were a couple questions so I'm going to let you say something, Kevin, but let me just make sure I address. So Sam Callison, and I know this is wrong, so you're going to have to call me on this. I keep trying to get on the call with you so we can actually find out the real name here. But Sam, you say, so how does this affect the isolation of one working now from home without a family unit there? That's one question that we have. And we have some other stuff too, but yeah, I think that, so that the key is, from my perspective, and I'm gonna let you guys talk on this one. If you don't have a family unit there. So if you're used to being at work, now you're at home and you don't have a family unit. I do have a family unit, and it is a gift, Sam, for me to have that. And I'm 100% aware of that. And so, what do you do? And I think us, like right now, what we're doing, this is live, but you don't have to do live. You can find free, I don't know, Skype or whatever it is, FaceTime, where you can try to connect with people that way. Writing notes to people also helps. I mean, I think that any way you can connect that way. And then when the weather is good, they did say you can kind of go to the park if it's not a full park, and you can be, keeping your distance, but be around people physically if you're that way too. That's something that happens if it's not a full park and you're in decent weather, not like right now with me and all the snow coming down. I guess I could snowshoe or something right now to go see someone. But I think just seeing these guys right here, I'm already feeling like I feel good because these are my guy. Like, I know this is my community, right? So I'm seeing them and it makes me feel good. And I think that's what you want to do, Sam, is just reach out to those people who, when you see them and you hear their voices, it just makes you, feel better. and just keeping yourself, I mean, there's so many things like at home, or can you work out? Can you do puzzles? And if you're by yourself, that's hard. Obviously, some people do like to do puzzles by themselves, but what can you do to uplift yourself? And that's what I would say. Now, what about you two? What do you think? And people who you don't have the home, I don't know, that might be Kevin. Kevin, do you have family right at home? You might be a better person to answer it. There's 6 of us here. So.
I mean, I was going to let Joe go first if he wanted to.
Oh, sure. I'll just go real quickly. Thanks, Kevin. One thing I would say is a lot of companies now have the ability to instant message each other and get in touch that way, in addition to the phone and email. One nice thing about phone, video chat, or instant messaging is it feels a little bit more live, right? Whereas email, it's gone, and you might not get a response for a while. So what I would say with that is what I found to be helpful times when I'm virtual more often than not is it's important to reach out to people just to reach out to them, right? You don't want to be the person that only reaches out to people when they need something, right? So if I reach out to you 4, 5, 6 times and I'm just saying, look, I don't need anything. I just want to see how you're doing. Maybe you need something from me. We talk 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then it's done, and you get into that. And then at some point when you reach out to them and you really need something, that reception is a lot different than like, haven't heard from you in 6 months. Oh no, what does this guy or what does this gal want? So just that sort of non-consequential kind of touch or contact, I find, is very helpful. And like you were saying, Heather, it takes a little bit of discipline. It takes, you got to really think about it and get into it, which is difficult when everyone's sort of under very heavy workloads. But I would look at it as that's part of your job. It's actually part of your job to keep yourself healthy, to keep your team members healthy, because the overall productivity of the team goes down if you lose connection. So interested to hear your thoughts, Kevin.
Well, you just mentioned, God, there's so much great stuff. Every time you guys talk, it's like it spurs like a million other things that I want to talk about. Keeping that overall health, Joe, that you're talking about, that was kind of what the overall topic at NLV was about, where thinking of these 4 quadrants of health, these 4 elements of health, I think of it like the 4 tires on a car. And if just one tire is flat, that car's not running. And you can't pump up just one tire and expect that car to go well. So it seems like today we focus so much on physical health. That's just one tire, and the other ones just fall by the wayside. And what I'm seeing in the world is that the emotional health tire is not getting like any air whatsoever. And that's the one we really need to nurture. And now more than ever before, because we don't have these ways of staying connected, like just from going to work and being around people, we have to make even more of an effort to maintain those connections. And we have all this great technology, so why not use the technology to our advantage? It doesn't have to be just Facebook memes and pictures of your food, right? But there can be some value to that, and LinkedIn and so on. But the phone calls, the text messaging, instant messaging, WhatsApp messaging, Zoom, and whatever video calls. But can I do the shameless plug now?
Oh, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Is there an app for that, Kevin? Is there an app for that?
Well, Joe, it's interesting that you asked that. There is an app that just came on the market, and it's free, and it's called Uchi. It's spelled UCHI, and Uchi in Japanese means in-group or inner circle. And the whole goal of Uchi is to help people connect authentically with those who matter most to them. It's a totally private app, but it's a really fun Q&A app where you answer questions. There's a huge database of questions. You answer questions, your friends answer the same question or answer the questions, and you just read each other's answers. But you can't read someone's answer unless you're friends and you've already answered that question yourself. So there's a reciprocity. You have to be a contributor, right? You have to be a contributor in order to be a consumer, which is different than any other app. And it's totally private, totally safe, because no one has access to your content except for the friends that you've invited into your Uchi. So again, Uchi, in-group, inner circle. So Go have fun, answer questions. Like I said, I'm learning things about my parents that I've never known before, and it's awesome. And in terms of the workplace, a manager can easily set up an Uchi tribe, and there is a small fee for that, but they can set up an Uchi tribe where they can create their own set of questions and invite a small group of people that do not have to be in their regular Uchi network and get a conversation going that way. And, after about 5 or 7 days, the conversation is going to naturally end, but you're going to learn about each other, which goes back to the familiarity, the rapport, the trust, feeling valued, feeling heard, and it just helps bring the groups together. Teachers can do the same thing, with a group of students. A teacher can guide the conversation around a subject matter and then have the students start discussing the subject matter, all the while being monitored by the teacher, right? So if there's any, inappropriate behavior going on, the teacher can, is involved in all that. But it's a way to have real subject matter conversations. And we learn by communicating. We learn by sharing ideas, thoughts, perspective. So use it to your advantage. I mean, the tool is out there, especially the elderly community. Anyway, I go on and on. So,
well, I love. Well, just the one person I didn't say who was on actually watching in right now is Melissa Hughes. So she's part of our No Longer Virtual tribe as well. And of course, agreeing, I'm sure her head is shaking right now a lot. So I thank you for joining, Melissa. And I noticed, David Beaumont, you said genuine care is so important. Your team will know they are human just like the other person. And I think that, it's true. I think with everything that we've spoken about today, we are all humans going through this. I mean, it doesn't matter what we look like on social media. In the end, we are all humans going through a lot of levels of emotions and complexities. I would definitely say that even though they say that they're talking about distance, not to isolate yourself. That's very critical to make sure that you're bringing yourself into the fold with people that you know, that you love and care about, even if you're not right next to them. Do the things we're doing now. Do it any way you need to. Some people aren't as extroverted, don't want to do video. You feel like you look awful. Who cares, right? We can't all dress up and look beautiful every single day. In the end, you're there with your people. So make sure you're there with your people so that you can experience that deep connection that we're talking about, and that your emotional well-being can be fully under your charge as much as possible. Otherwise, we don't want to all let go of that in this crazy time. So you guys have any wrap up things you want to say to those who are listening in right now?
Sure.
I think this is awesome. Thank you so much, Heather, for putting the three of us together. Super fun and such an important topic, especially right now, not just US, but globally.
This is recorded to everyone. So if for some reason you missed the first part, you can always come back. Definitely share it with people you think you need to hear the message as well. And then Joe, what about you? You have some wrap up message as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to share an idea I had that dawned on me lately. So I think I've told both of you the definition of charisma I came up with, which is the ability to sense and deliver exactly what's needed from an emotional perspective in a given moment. So we've been talking about emotional health here. And what I realized is if you put them on a quadrant, right? Sensing, delivering what's emotionally needed, high, low, right? Your typical 4 quadrant. If it's high sensing and high delivering, you're charismatic, right? Who doesn't want to be around a person who senses what they need emotionally and helps them get it, right? Kevin, you mentioned narcissists earlier. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. Low sensing, low delivering. It's just me.
Right.
Now, in the other quadrants, if you're a high sensor, but you don't deliver anything, like, oh, I can tell you're having a bad day, but I'm not really going to do anything about it, you're observant. So it's better than being narcissistic, but you're not quite charismatic. And the last quadrant is if you can deliver something emotionally, but you don't sense what people really need, you're pushy, right? You can push people to change, to do something, but they don't want to go there yet, or they're not ready. But the key, the magic quadrant, to steal from Gartner, is to sense and deliver high. You're going to be charismatic. Who doesn't want to be around a person who senses and delivers what they need emotionally?
I love that. Have you written that up like in an article or anything?
It's coming. I'll probably post it on Thrive or Biz Catalyst, and I made it like a little graphic.
Oh,
and stuff.
good.
So I'm working on it.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Kevin.
I'd love to see that.
I love it. Oh, I always say like this is some of this reminds me, there's a lot of things that are wrapped in here are emotional intelligence concepts. And so when you think about emotional intelligence, there are 4 quadrants. Everything's like a 4-quadrant model. It's so interesting. But when you think about what you were talking about, Kevin, which is this like awareness, self-awareness, that's the doorway to everything else emotionally intelligent. So you can't even be those other things, meaning having emotional self-management, being someone who's more socially intelligent, understanding what's happening in other people's lives and actually pausing. And you can't be adaptable and inspiring and all these things you think of. You think of an emotionally intelligent leader unless you're aware of yourself. So maybe let's just take this time as we are off, and I don't know if we're at home or craziness, who knows what's happening in our lives, but if we have any pause time, any downtime, let's take this time to become more self-aware and then more socially aware of those around us. And if we can kind of conquer those first 2 of those quadrants of emotional intelligence, then maybe we have a chance at controlling our emotions and helping others control theirs and being more adaptable to what's happening around us. And then, of course, inspiring others to think differently. So I think that would be a great thing for us to commit to, just committing to being more aware of ourselves, more aware of what's happening to others, and maybe even how we impact them. That would be fun to do. So thank you guys for joining in and helping us ramp up all of these awareness and concepts and emotional well-being. And I mean, so much giftedness here. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Heather, for inviting us. Thanks,
you.
Kevin.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Heather. Super fun.
Bye.